I believe that we are live.
I got a little notice on there that says meeting is now streaming live on Facebook.
Are you kidding me? What did I tell you, huh?
Our hiking partner is going to mull it over.
So I'm pretty sure we're live. Like I said, every time I got this. There we go. Hey, yeah, yeah. And what I wanna do is put the phone number in here. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Glad to be here with you for Common Ground. I'm gonna go like this, and I'm gonna go put this in there. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Delighted to have you with us. We'll start in just a moment. Type in and say hello to us. Hi, everybody. I put the phone number in there. If you want to call in, it's a little tricky. I think you have to call in and then put in like a password. But I'd love to invite you to call into tonight's show. And it's all the information's in the text thread. But I think you have to like call in and then put a code, like a number, like a code in. But glad to have you all with us tonight. We're going to start off in just a moment. Just give it another minute or two, let a few more people come on. People aren't used to me starting on time. Isn't that right, Eric?
Yeah, I can. I had a little. I had a little cough there that I had to get a little cough and drink some water. Yeah, not known for his punctuality, Mr. Lombardo.
Pete, Thomas, Denise, welcome. Glad you guys are here. So glad to have you tonight. Really excited about tonight's show. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Got some good stuff to share with you tonight. And eager to hear from all of you. Once again, this is Common Ground. We're going to start it off here in just a moment. In fact, I'll tell you what. Let's rock and roll. So let me get this sucker lined up as I always do, and we will kick the show off on another lovely Friday evening. Want to say thank you to Della. It's her birthday tonight. She's letting me do the show.
Della, happy birthday!
She can't hear you right now, but she's watching. She'll hear you out there. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. You are on Common Ground, the place we bring fear to watch it die, or as I've rewritten, where we seek to transform division into understanding. That's a better description. As I speak, fear and bigotry threaten to tear our nation apart. And on this show, we seek to strike some blow against that fear that divides us by listening to one another as we discuss the most difficult topics with respect, civility, and a mind open to a differing opinion. And I'm happy to tell you that we found over and over again that when we can discuss our opinions freely, we can form an alliance of reason with our fellow citizens, even when we don't agree. We discover we're not all that different, and it's not so hard to reach common ground. I'm your host, John Lombardo. Our topic for tonight's discussion, government overreach. When is it too much? This topic was Eric's suggestion, and Eric is here with me. You see him on screen right now. It's such an important topic. I'm glad we're doing this tonight, Eric, because I see so much out there that I would consider to be no-brainer overreach from the government. And then I see other areas where I don't think the government's doing enough, whether it's underreaching, not underyanking, underreaching. Very, very important difference. But I think that, and then a lot of my fellow Americans out there see it differently. They think the overreaching that I see is okay, and the underreaching is where the problem is. So we have these differing opinions on this. What did you come up with this week? What were your thoughts about it?
Well, I remember a few things that some of our audience have talked about. Our friend, our loyal participant Pete has often talked about questioned whether or not shutting businesses is a form of overreach, and it's a very interesting question. And the where I land on that is the public health crisis is very real. and and also done a very poor job as a country, um, like using the appropriate amount of reach, and we don't we seem to not be targeting correctly, whether it's closures or testing or stimulus or whatever. We see a little bit. I mean, we're just having blanket sort of approaches to these things, and then we have talked a lot about the current situation in Portland. And as you were sort of suggesting, I mean, one of the topics that often comes up with where the police funding is and what we're doing is under policing and over policing. And we see that with this response, we have seen over and over again an under, like a less than appropriate response to certain threats. And we see a response to this threat that seems like an overreaction. We have underreaction, overreaction. And so I'll be interested to hear. I mean, I'd like to talk more about that, but I'll just pose it as as part of
Sure.
for today.
Yeah, by the way, I want to say something that I want to tell everybody about an experience I had today. I took my family out for a birthday breakfast for Della. And if you're in Ventura, we went to this new place called Immigrant Sun Cafe. Have you heard of it, Eric?
I have, yeah.
It's great. It's such a great place. If you're in Ventura, the guy, his name's Alessandro. He's a great guy. He owns the place. His family's from Italy. He didn't pay me to say this. I'm just telling you, we just had a great time. The food was fantastic. The tiramisu was incredible. If you're in Ventura, it's exactly the kind of business we want to support here. They're local people. It's a family-owned business, and they really care about what they do. But talking to Alessandro, he, as a small business owner here in Ventura, around what's going on with the COVID-19 coronavirus things, he is it's so unclear to him where to draw the line. When should I shut down? What can I open? What can't I open? Things have been so unclear to him, and that's just one small business. I mean, this has really been rough on small businesses. You mentioned Pete's take on that. So I think that I think we have suffered from a lack of a well-rounded view and a clear plan that has really, really impacted American businesses, particularly small businesses. And I think that long-term is going to be something that we really struggle to bring back. I'm very concerned about that. I was thinking about it as you brought Pete up and some of the things that Pete has mentioned on the show. And I think Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, I think Pete shares my concern about that. But let's get into talking about. We got Sean, Marianne, Marcia, Jimmy. Good to have you guys here. Let's get into talking a little bit about Portland. Portland has been in the headlines this week for a couple of reasons. You've heard that there's been a lot of riots there, a lot of trouble there. And then also it seems to have been the first of several cities that the president plans to send federal agents into to quell this uprising, if there is such a thing, and to protect federal buildings. I believe that's the objective, what these federal agents claim. And then you hear scary stories. You hear scary stories about riots and buildings destroyed and windows broken. You also hear scary stories about people being stuffed into vans and taken off with unmarked vans by people in uniforms, taking them off to God knows where, interrogating them, and then letting them go. So one thing I did, we have a friend who lives in Portland, and I got to talking to him, and I asked him to give us the perspective of a person actually living in Portland, and he agreed to do that. And I always feel like, one of my goals is to if we're going to do this show, I want to provide at least the perspective of people on the front lines. Like, look, everybody's got an opinion. People have a way of looking at things. None of us are going to get around that. But, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would rather have someone who's in Portland living through this share their experience with us. And so I want to do that right now. If I can, I want to bring Mike in. Mike, are you with us?
I'm here. Hold on one sec. There we go.
Recognize that voice.
It's my dear friend, Mr. Mike Boone. So good to have you here
John.
with us, brother.
Yeah, good to be here. How are you guys?
Good, man. Love you, man. Really good to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
So, Mike, and Mike, while you're talking, I'm going to bring up some of the things you shared with me last night, but I just wanted you, we are live right now on Facebook, and I wanted you to just take a moment and share with everybody what your perspective is on what's happened in Portland and what's been going on. You live minutes from the federal building and from where all this is happening, and just share your perspective, if you will.
Yeah, so I haven't been down. I've supported the Black Lives Matter marchers, but I haven't been down there. I take care of my mom. She has dementia and she lives with us here. So I've been afraid to go down and with the COVID pandemic going on. We left and went on a trip over the weekend or for about 5 days up to northern Washington. And I was getting all sorts of messages. I was seeing, obviously in the media, I was seeing some changes, the federal government coming in and being and occupying the federal building downtown. And people were sending me all sorts of messages about wondering if we were okay and thinking it was a war zone. And I was wondering what was going on down here. So we got back on Thursday, and I'm not kidding. This is like we live in Mayberry. Like there's nothing going on. There's people sitting out at restaurants and bars. I live by the river. My kids were at the river yesterday. They're in the parks. So I told Felice, I'm going to go down and see what's going on. She said, well, I'll go with you. Last night.
And Mike, I just want to tell everybody. Last night, Mike actually FaceTimed me from across from the federal building, and Mike, I have the map you sent me up, so everybody can see the map of where
Yeah.
everything was going down. If you want to, talk about that.
No, I think it's because people are thinking this is like some, city and, a war zone or whatever. It's confined. You see the Hatfield courthouse there. That's the federal building.
Okay.
Like when they're taking video footage, when I'm watching it on CNN or, I don't watch Fox. My mom's up there watching it right now. But when I see it, they take a bunch of different camera angles of this little area.
Yeah.
And make it look like this is going on all over town.
Right.
It's the federal building. Let's start. So Felice and I came across the Hawthorne Bridge last night. We were looking at the river and there's people swimming in the river, people on jet skis, people boating, people out in the parks, families all over the place. And it doesn't comport with what you're seeing on the news. I didn't start seeing any evidence of like what was going on until I was right downtown and right across the street. I mean, John, is that map still up there or the map of it?
There it is. It's back again. I just put it back up for
because
you.
Like literally the building right underneath where it says Hatfield, that corner, there's a Starbucks there and it's open. Yeah. So, it's really not the war zone that they're saying. Next door to it, the bottom, so it, like all good civic layout and planning, they provide a public space in front of civic buildings for a reason, so that people can assemble and exercise their First Amendment rights. And Lonsdale Park and Chapman Square, that's always, it's constantly, there's, it's a very activist city we live in. Mm-hmm. So there's always people down there, whether it's, supporting homeless rights or Black Lives Matter they've been out there for every Tamara Rice to Ahmaud Arbery. They've all been reasons that people have come down there and gathered. And obviously there's people. So once when the George Floyd videos came out, people were down there that night, and it's gone on, the protests since then. I mean, it hasn't stopped. So I didn't know what to expect when I went over there, but I showed up, Felice and I, and we started walking around, and we were, obviously everyone's wearing masks. When I got down there, I was a little worried because of crowds, and people were observing 6 feet of distance. They were wearing masks. I know that wasn't going to be possible later when the big crowd showed up. and so we didn't hang out till late. Although I have several friends who did.
Well, Mike, I'm gonna, while you're talking, I'm gonna show this
I get
video.
it. Go home. If you're working hard, go home. But stay as long as
And this is an
you
actual
possibly
video
can.
downtown last
And
night.
also, if you can't make it, tell 3 friends. Come one day, tell 3 friends. Just tell 3 friends every single day about this, because we need this to be getting bigger, not smaller. Every day this should be getting bigger. Portland's not going to stop until it does it. Here. If I have to fight until the day I die, I will. But all you guys
So that's, it's nice to see that, you know, it's nice to see that it's, like you say, largely peaceable, just because obviously I don't want my friends and loved ones, you know, struggling through that. But you did take a picture I want to share with everybody. Let me know if you guys can see it. You did take a picture of where the trouble is, the graffiti. You sent that to me, like this corner of the building has been painted and messed with, right? Is that it?
Yeah, that is the federal building. And most of the people that you were seeing just then are in the building to the right, which is the Multnomah County building. I think it's the police bureau headquarters as well. Is right there, the yellow building to the right. And so and I saw 2 policemen at the back of that building, and that was it. And then there was some people giving speeches on the front steps of this building to the right. The federal building, this is where it's all happened. The fence was put up that day. It wasn't there previously.
As the corona lockdowns have stretched into
Whoops.
month 4, can you believe it?
I got another video playing. Didn't mean to do that.
Many
Sorry,
people in
guys.
America
Yeah, but directly across from there in Lonsdale Park, there's like a free kitchen, so they're feeding people, clothing people. There was people giving out face masks to anyone who didn't have them, water, Gatorade. People are bringing in their own supplies. When Felice and I were leaving, we started walking back across the Hawthorne Bridge, and we were parked up Hawthorne on the east side of the river, and there was families unloading, and they were unloading like bags of stuff to bring down there to give to people. It's just being.
And Michael, who is on here, who's viewing right now, and Michael said, I was out on the Willamette aboard the Portland Spirit on Wednesday. It was quite peaceful. He said, I have some photos from the river I wish I could attach and show you just how peaceful it was Wednesday night. Well, so okay, look, I'm really glad to hear that it's peaceful there. I'm really glad to hear that my friends who live in that beautiful city are safe. Man, I love Portland. It's such a great town. Absolutely love it there. So let me ask you this. Then, as a citizen of Portland, and I want everybody to know, Mike, I've known Mike my whole life. Mike, you and I have never talked politics before. I'm going to assume that you probably have I don't know what your political views are, but what is your thought? What are your thoughts as a citizen of Portland? Why is this happening?
Well, I completely support that. I think it's being used as a game to change the subject on a federal level. I think the federal authorities are using it, Trump administration, to talk about this rather than the COVID nightmare that he's blown.
Okay.
And I mean, so I would say this. I haven't been down there late at night. Obviously, there's some damage to the bottom of that federal building.
Mm-hmm.
There's boarded up windows in other buildings. I have no doubt that there's some people out there that are vandalizing and causing trouble.
Yeah.
A peaceful crowd. And when's that not going to happen when you have thousands and thousands of people?
Yeah, I saw the video of the mayor when the police fired tear gas. And while that seemed crazy to me that they would do that, there were people throwing flaming bags of stuff over a gate or something, which is like, what are you doing? It's so stupid.
Right.
It's so frustrating that, personally, I believe that the peaceful protests for us to restructure our law enforcement systems so that people of color aren't targeted. I think this is important work, and I want to see it progress. And I get furious with the few people that screw it up and give fodder to those who want to oppose it by doing these stupid, violent actions. Like, I understand there's anger, I understand that, but it's got to be channeled into something positive because we're making things happen. It's a good thing. So I get
Amen. I hear you there. As far as the graffiti and stuff, the damage I've seen to the building, you know, you and me could go out there with some rollers and paintbrushes and it would be done in a while. I have seen videos of them breaking windows that are behind the boarded up glass, and a lot more radical stuff happening later at night. You know, I haven't witnessed that. I wasn't there for that. It is confined to a very limited area. And, you know, if this is going to be the threshold that they bring in federal police and suddenly our federal buildings are going to be garrisons for some federal police to live inside of, or whatever they're doing. I just think it's a really low threshold. Like,
Well, it's also, to me, speaking strictly from my own point of view, it's abundantly clear that these protests are necessary when a woman like Breonna Taylor can be shot in her house and no charges are brought against anybody. But if somebody breaks a few windows and spray paints something, the National Guard or federal agents have to be called in. That shows me where the priorities are, and that shows me that there's work to do, huh?
well, and that's it. The National Guard is, the governor could call in the National Guard if she feels it's necessary.
I meant federal
It's not-
agents. I'm sorry. Yeah.
It's not up to Trump to come in with federal law enforcement that are not, you know, under the watch of the governor or the mayor or any local authorities. It's him calling the shot. If they want to start opening fire with real bullets, you know, I don't know. Could that happen? I know Tuesday night, a woman, she's a professor at Lewis and Clark College, 52-year-old, out there with her family. She was shot in the head by a rubber bullet and ended up in the hospital. And she was there with her kids and her family, and she wasn't anywhere near the front. Don't know if it was a miss. I don't know what happened, if they were targeting someone else, but she was shot. I don't have her name here, but
This is the things that concerns me the most. You know, what we're talking about is vandalism, and not, to me, breaking windows, spray painting, destroying a statue, that is vandalism. There are, and you know, I've seen photos of people being shot with, you know, rubber bullets or tear gas hit, like, and it's not an accident. I mean, I can't speak to that particular incident, but I've seen people, law enforcement shoot tear gas canisters at people. There's no accident. They're shooting them at them. And there have been people that have lost their lives. There have been people that have lost eyes. There have been people that have had brain damage. They're across the country. And I saw a video the other night where this woman got her teeth knocked out by one of these officers with a billy club, and one tooth is not worth that. I mean, these are inanimate objects, you know. And Mike's point is super important. What is the threshold for bringing the troops in? And we're not talking about bringing the troops in to occupy the building. I don't know that anyone would really complain about that. People might go, hey, is that really necessary? What we're talking about is bringing federal, unmarked, paramilitary presence in, and then sweeping the streets and shooting tear gas and rubber bullets at people. That over what? I mean, as far as I understand it, the point of this is to protect the monument and the building. I don't see sweeping the streets. You know, John said something in the opener where he said, quell an uprising. Well, that's not what our government is supposed to do, quell uprisings.
Right.
If they're there and there's vandalism that they witnessed, then arrest the person doing the vandalism.
The clear language that I heard the White House use, and the people that the White House had sent to do the job, the clear language I heard them use was, they used the word riot, and they used that word protect federal buildings, and we're gonna do our job, is what they said. So
wouldn't buildings mean being in the building and being around the building and protecting the building? And so if somebody came up to the building to do some damage, then you interact with that person. That's not what's happening. I mean, to Mike's earlier point as well, like about how he sees the coverage and how different it looks. And John and I have talked on almost every one of our shows about how the media, focuses in really closely on just the part that they want you to see.
Sure.
Not just literally with a camera, but just in their approach and their coverage. And, I've been in a couple of situations where I've seen the same thing, where I was present at something that happened. And then I saw coverage on the news later, and it was like, oh, there were 20,000 people there, and there was 100 people acting like jackasses. And all I saw on the news was the 100 people acting like jackasses.
Exactly.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
I saw a video going. It was on Facebook, and somebody was countering what I was saying with some video that they're not even local, but they had picked it up online. And I was watching the video, and what they had done is they spliced together a bunch of video clips, and they had these little taglines underneath this streaming thing that. And if I went in there and put the narrative underneath any of these images, I could completely change the story. But their story was, rioters going crazy and attacking. I even saw, do you guys, there's a great podcast for everybody that's listening. Sorry, John and Ricer. It's almost as good as Common Ground. But it's called The Bulwark, and it's
Bulwark?
The Bulwark podcast. It's Charlie Sykes. He's, it's conservatives. It's all conservatives.
I'll put it in type it in the comments so everybody can see what it is.
I think it's an amazing podcast. He was saying today, he had who do you have on? Anyway, that's irrelevant. But they were talking about a video that was put out, and it was showing the Portland protesters beating up a police officer or one of these national police down there. And they said that is from 2014. It was actually in the Ukraine, yeah. And they were pro-democracy demonstrators.
Yeah,
and
I mean that actually was an ad that was paid for by the Trump campaign. It was you can look it up. I'm not just trying to attack him. It's true. They were it was discovered that they had created that video. It's a campaign ad, and it was video from Ukraine in 2014. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I would suggest that podcast because we get in the echo chamber. I mean, I know I'm in the echo chamber here in Portland, and it really helps me to these are people that I disagree with on a lot of stuff, but they have their hearts in the right place, and they want the best for our country and know that we're headed in the wrong direction. So
yeah, the couple of comments. Clara said, "How does this align with our First Amendment of the Constitution? As long as no crimes are being committed, I think it's a violation of our constitutional rights." Clara. Pete said, "Let's say all of your statements are true and that there's only random vandalism occurring. What level of aggression would you say justifies police or enforcement intervention?" I would say that when a person is murdered in their home, they should be arrested.
Yeah,
the people who shot her should be arrested. I think that anybody who's setting things on fire and throwing rocks at police, should they be arrested? Yeah, of course. But if there's so much focus from a perspective on things getting broken and burned and ignoring the loss of life in the African American community that is undeniable, and that in my opinion should be the tantamount concern in everyone's mind in this matter. Now, look, there are thousands and thousands of people protesting around this country tonight, and the bare minimum of them are going to do anything illegal. We just showed you the video. But Mike's right. Look, if there's stupid people breaking stuff and stealing and lighting things on fire, they should get arrested. But I just fail to. From what I've seen in Portland, and we've got a guy here who lives there, I don't see a need, and we've got another person in the thread who was down there on Wednesday night. Doesn't sound like it's necessary to send federal agents in to handle this issue. Would it be fair to say that, Mike?
Yeah, if that's the threshold, they're going to be in every single town in our country. There's just
they're sending them to Chicago and Seattle, and as we speak, yeah.
Said if it's to quell an uprising, because that's a word that's a different philosophy, because that's what it appears. We have seen many times, and then to sort of address Pete's question or comment a little bit, I've seen many times police lining the streets to allow protesters, which they should do. By the way, our First Amendment to the Constitution is the freedom of speech, and our freedom to gather is guaranteed in the Constitution for the very reason that we are supposed to as citizens, hold the government accountable. And so what police should do is be present so that people have the right, so that they're protecting. I'm sure that it's one incident, but people have saw this Navy veteran come up to the police, and it was reported that what he was saying was, "Why are you not protecting the Constitution? You took an oath." And they beat him with billy clubs and sprayed him in the face with pepper spray, and he walked away. He wasn't doing anything illegal. He walked up and asked a question, and that's what I want to know. Like, to me, defending the Constitution means you're standing by, making sure that people who are protesting have the right to protest. And if there's a law that's broken, if somebody vandalizes or somebody, assaults another person, then that person is arrested. I don't see how, and to Pete's question, I don't know what the word aggression exactly means. Yelling a group of people.
Well, Eric, throwing bags of flaming stuff at police officers would be called aggression.
So
yeah, absolutely. And so, okay, so engage those people. But what we've seen is the streets being swept. We've seen people, shooting projectiles at people that are standing by.
I've seen a lot of that too. Yeah,
and we don't need federal police officers to be doing that work. We have local ones that are accountable to local people.
Yeah, well, they're not even federal law enforcement. I got one more thing, guys. We got another minute we can spend on this, then we got to move on. But one more thing I do want to say, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but there is a case brought in the state of Oregon against Homeland Security and U.S. Marshals. It's a restraining order. And the judge granted the order today. The Judge Simon said the free press is the guardian of public interest, and the independent judiciary is the guardian of the free press. And the established case is around the idea that these federal agents also are not allowing press into the area to film what's happening, report on what's happening, and so they won that was filed, and the judge granted it. I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Not just that, but some of the evidence in there was video footage of reporters who are identifying themselves as reporters being hit with tear gas, so it's not just that they were not letting them in. They were, and we've seen other videos in other places of police, beating people, beating media members. And so this is what we're talking about. I mean, I don't want to get too gentle about this. What we're seeing is police brutality. And, on top of that, in the Portland situation right now, we're seeing a federal government deciding to use, forces that are unmarked, unnamed, for not being called by a governor or a mayor, or, the building wasn't occupied. It was spray painted and some windows. It was vandalized. And even that, as I said, I could understand. Okay, if you really feel that strongly, send some people in there to occupy the building, some federal agents to be in the building. But what are we doing shooting projectiles at people and tear gassing people?
Mike, I want to thank you so much for being with us here tonight, man. I really appreciate it. It's good to see you. I love you, man. Stay safe.
Yeah, I love you too. Stay safe, guys, and thank you for the podcast. I enjoy it.
Mike, when things are safe again, I'll be up there soon and see you. I was coming up in August, but not doing that now. But I'll be up pretty soon.
Yeah, do look me up when you get up here. Take care, guys. Bye.
Bye, Mike. All right. Well, we're going to we're gonna pivot now. You've heard all this liberal bullshit being spewed out by us. We're gonna bring on our next guest. I'm very excited to have this gentleman with us tonight. His name is Trent Read. Trent is, he began his career as an analyst in investment banking with Deutsche Bank. He was a senior financial analyst for Honeywell, vice president at Wachovia Securities, and has been the CFO of 2 venture growth equity-backed companies that ranked on Inc. magazine's list of fastest growing companies in the country. And more importantly, for the purposes of this show, Trent brings to the table a conservative view, which we lack sometimes. And I'm excited to have someone with us tonight that can have a dialogue with us around some of these topics from a different perspective. So, Trent, are you with us, sir?
Yes, I am.
Hey. Hi, Trent. Nice to have you.
Good to be on.
Thank you for being here. This is Eric Rodriguez, my co-host. Eric, Trent, say hello.
How you doing, Eric?
So, Trent, we've been talking a little bit about the topic tonight was government overreach, and my perspective on this issue is that I think that we have very different opinions of what is enough and what is too much, and with the government's intervention into some of the things, the crises that we have going on right now. And I think that those often get divided along party lines. And we were just discussing what has happened up in Portland. I don't know if you were able to see the show thus far, but my friend Mike Boone was on, who lives up there. We had some footage and some video and some pictures of what things are going like, what's happening up in Portland. What are your perspectives around what I said about that and what's happening with federal agents being sent to some of these cities?
Yeah, great. And I apologize that I don't have full context on what's been said so far. I've been looking at a screen that said virtual green room. And so just came in from the virtual green room, but I am up to speed on what's going on. And so, from my perspective, I do think that, I don't know if it's a unique perspective. I think there's a lot of us that feel like that we as people tend to have a little bit of a team politics mentality where we cheer for our team and we see the flaws in the other team. And it's similar to everybody in the world, practically. He was the most popular athlete in the world before Tiger Woods was Michael Jordan. But I really dislike Michael Jordan because he kept beating my Jazz, right? And everybody on the Bulls, hated Dennis Rodman when he was on the Pistons, but then once he's on the Bulls, you love him, right? And so my perspective on this stuff, to be honest, is that I saw a lot of people on the other side of the aisle, and I'm sort of in the middle, but to the right of the aisle, right? A lot of people on the other side of the aisle when the government was going in and enforcing law with the Bundy family, sort of cheering and saying, yeah, Obama should send them in and take those rebellious Bundys out. They shouldn't be, arguing for rights that they don't have on those federal lands. And they even took over a BLM office. I mean, what kind of violence is this, taking over a BLM office? And so, Obama and his crew sent people in and said, you're getting out. And eventually it also led to the killing of one of the people by a federal officer. And so now here and people on my side were like, wait a second, hold on, calm down with all of the enforcing things through the feds. And now flip the side, and now we've got all sorts of property destruction going on. And now are there peaceful protesters? Absolutely, but I think I'd find it hard to dispute that there's not a fair amount of property damage going on and impact on businesses in that area. And I think that, they're shooting fireworks at the federal court building, and there's been attempts to light it on fire. And so there are laws, and those laws do provide for enforcing the law. And ultimately, I personally would love it if the local authorities were enforcing the law. I think that's the right way to go. But when they're sort of abdicating the responsibility to enforce the law, then I think that as long as the federal officers are giving people their rights, I've heard a lot of complaining, but I haven't heard anybody saying my son disappeared and I don't know where he is. But it seems to be like that's the implication by some of the verbiage being used is they're jumping in and they're unmarked and they're throwing them in unmarked vans and taking them off to who knows where. My understanding is they're probably being read their Miranda rights. They're being interrogated and let out unless they start hearing about.
That's my understanding too. Yeah.
Right. And so would I prefer that the feds stay out of what is to a large extent a local matter? Yes, but do I think that the local people have their civil rights that, I mean, we're not hearing from them, so maybe nobody cares, but I would imagine there's some business owner there that's impacted by everything that's going on that's like, what about my rights? And so I think that it should be incumbent on the mayor to have some version of peaceful protest versus allowing it to de-escalate or devolve into some of the more destructive stuff that's going on. And I think there's an analog in Seattle where the mayor was saying, oh, this is all fine. It's sort of a summer of love. And then when it showed up on her doorstep, all of a sudden she said, well, wait, this has gone too far. We need to quell this. And you're like, okay, well, see, that's how people that are in that area, that live in that area, that have businesses in that area feel. And you can't just throw them by the wayside. You need to care about their civil rights as well, in my opinion.
Sure. Thank you. So I think I want to read you a comment from one of our viewers. I think they're referring, Carol, forgive me if I get this wrong. I think they're referring to your drawing an equivalency between the Bundys and she said they had guns. So I think that's what her point was, but that's all she said. So I don't know if I can.
The Bundys did have guns. And I mean, similarly, there was the protest in Michigan where people were arguing for Second Amendment rights, and the media made them out to be really, pretty hysterical people. And there's pictures of people right in one another's faces yelling. And I certainly don't agree with that, especially in the midst of a pandemic. But nonetheless, it is really interesting how the majority of media, paints those protests as super violent, even though not a shot is fired. And they're just saying, I have a right to have this. And that might feel really threatening. I understand, but they're saying I have a right to have this, and they're cleaning up after themselves, and they're, buying from local businesses while they're there. And then the people that are, in Portland or Seattle, there was definitely in Seattle a lot of guns in the CHOP area that were seen on, pictures and video. The people that kind of assumed the role of the police within CHOP were walking around with, assault weapons.
Right.
And I've seen pictures and video of the people in Portland that are, they have batons, they're firing fireworks, they're doing all sorts of things that, when you're throwing a projectile at somebody, it can hurt. And we've seen a lot of the law enforcement be hurt. And so I think that a level of mutual respect needs to be there. But I understand the difference between the Bundys having their firearms. That said, if you read a lot about the Bundys, you'll see they've won all of their court cases so far for some reason. I don't follow it exceedingly close, but I know they've won their court cases for one reason or another. And I do know that in those court cases, it's been implied that they were being pretty heavily intimidated by armed people as well.
Pete, one of our viewers, Pete, said, I really think we need clarity in our laws. How do we protect people who are neither protesters or the police? And my hope for that is that my hope is that the protests are focused enough on a attainable goal that violence becomes an outlier act and nothing, not something that's common. We had right before you were on just now, Trent, we had a gentleman on, Mike, who lives in Portland, and he actually shared some footage he took from downtown last night, and right in front of the federal building, lots of people, and very peaceful, no problems at all. He said there were, right before the protest started, there were children playing, people walking around, the Starbucks on the corner was open. And, we all know that the media will find the one thing to fixate on to make it look maybe worse than it is. But also, to your point, we said this as well. I saw the video where the mayor of Portland was actually, they said he was gassed along with the protesters. But that happened because people were throwing flaming bags of crap over a gate at the at protesters and the federal agents and that kind of stuff. Just, it really frustrates me because I'd like to be able to see people exercise their right to protest. They should be able to do that, and these people ruin it for everybody. So Sharman said, local riots are not the business of the feds. Good point.
I agree. I think, though, that if those riots are impinging on the civil rights of people, and so it should be a protest. It should just be a protest. People, if they want something done, then peacefully protesting in the past has effectuated meaningful change. Even more meaningful change often is by actually getting involved in the system that they sometimes decry. I mean, for instance, here in Utah, the pandemic comes, right? And there's a lot of us who feel that in the grand scheme of things, we should be also considering people's ability to provide for themselves and their mental, your mental health, and all of the surgeries that are being delayed that are, quote unquote elective, but they're actually pretty important, and delayed diagnoses of things like cancer and so forth. And so a lot of us business people, hoping that business could be a little bit more open, reached out to the hospitals and said, hey, what can we do? The hospital said, we need extra space in case there's a surge. We have a bunch of empty hotels. I contacted my hotel friends, put them in contact with the University of Utah, and now we're filling up those hotel rooms with the elective procedures so that they can go get their procedure and convalesce at the hotel room and still leave space at the hospital in the event of a surge. And so, I mean, it would be really nice if if they genuinely care about some of these issues, if they actually did stuff to make something happen instead of just in many of our perspectives, the protesting is great. Rioting is like throwing a tantrum, and it doesn't really accomplish. It might get some attention, but it's mostly negative and counterproductive attention that doesn't win the hearts and minds of the people that you're trying to convince. And so if you really care about police brutality, which I think should, and people will probably hate me for saying this, but I have a good friend that was killed by a policeman in a situation where he was unarmed. The policeman was approaching his driver's side window. He'd been pulled over for driving erratically, which is dangerous. And as soon as the policeman was close enough to his window, he tried to take off so that he could drive away. The policeman decided to be a hero and jumped and grabbed onto the window, was being dragged, grabbed his firearm and shot him and killed him. Yeah. And that's the kind of situation that if he weren't of my same skin color, would have been a really big story. And instead it wasn't a big story. And so I still think that was police brutality as well, right? So I've for years and years thought that there's a problem within the police force, but I don't think. I have a neighbor that is a wonderful policeman that was saving lives just the other day during a fire. And so we need to recognize that the vast majority of police are great, but that doesn't mean that you can't do something about the problem. And I think to address the problem, you need to realize it's not a federal problem. There's localized problems in police forces. We love our police in Highland, Utah. There's no negative interactions practically at all, right? And so you go, where are the problems? And Obama was working on this, and it's the right idea. You benchmark the right things. What are the best practices that people are doing in police forces that are improving community cop relations? And let's get those even better. And then let's evangelize those to all of the communities where they have problems, especially the ones that are the biggest problems. And it's recruiting. Some of it's pay, because if you want to have the best and brightest, you probably need to pay them a little bit more, which goes contra to the whole defund the police. But I do agree and understand those that want to demilitarize the police, although I do think that they have the right to be practically
I think the terminology is such a problem. It should never have been called defund the police.
Right.
It should be a more effective allocation of funds so the police can better do the job that they're designed for.
Right. And so it's such a team politics environment, right? Where we're talking past each other, and if we think that something supports our side, we're like, yeah, and we tend to sort of ignore the things that don't support our side. And so, although I know it's not a perfect equivalation, or it's an imperfect equivalence between the Bundys and what's going on, there are some parallels in sort of the government overreach. And I mean, you can even think of, I know that what happened in Waco, people all think that the folks that were in Waco were practicing a religious sect that was way too out there, and there's problems with that. But women and children that were innocent were killed through feds intervening in what was probably a bit of a local problem, and so it happens on both sides, and it only becomes a political rallying point when we think it helps make our point, but I think we should all be against, federal intervention in areas where they don't belong. But I'm absolutely like, the locals cannot abdicate the responsibility. And I do think that you made a great point of where in the heavens is the legislature. I mean, help police know what they're supposed to do instead of by executive fiat saying, just don't enforce the law. I mean, really, like, when does the executive branch, yeah, I understand that they have that right. They have the right to decide when to and not enforce the law. But I think that the legislative branch increasingly here in the United States is abdicating its responsibility and just hoping to use their power as they have it as a weapon to hopefully get their executive in power and then have their executive exert too much influence. And I wish we'd move away from all of these. It happens on both sides, but all these executive orders, they shouldn't happen as much. It should be the legislative branch legislating, the executive branch upholding the law as it's legislated, and the judicial branch judging it based on how it's written.
Anytime pandering to special interests is going on, someone's getting neglected. It's in our law, and what's best for everyone is not being upheld. Eric, you had something you wanted to add, I believe.
100 things at this point, because Trent talked about a lot of different things. One thing though, there was some talk on the Senate floor today about introducing some bill that would really define this sort of action a little more clearly. And they were discussing it today and talking about, don't we really want to have governors, mayors, Congress involved in this kind of discussion when we're talking about deploying federal troops into an American city? And one of the things that we were talking about a little while ago before you came on, Trent, is it's a pretty low threshold. It seems to us that when we're talking about vandalism, which is what we're talking about vandalism. That's been the reason that I understand that we're going to protect these buildings, and even if in my mind, even if federal officers were sent in to occupy the federal building and to protect the building, but that's not what's happening. They're sweeping streets and shooting projectiles, and that seems like overreach clearly to me. And there's a lot of lawsuits, and we'll see where that goes. But it to me, it seems clearly like overreach. There's a couple other thoughts. First of all, thank you so much for connecting people. I mean, one of the things that I said 5 months ago on this show was, I don't understand why bright entrepreneurial people are not working out there to solve some of these problems, because some of the problems are fairly simple. It just takes cooperation. And instead of just sort of complaining or pretending that there's a storm that's going to go by, that we're just going to emerge out of our bunker afterwards, that's what Americans are supposed to be best at, right? So where creativity and where's our entrepreneurial spirit about how to creatively solve these problems? And so I really appreciate that we're doing that up there. It's the spirit that we all need, and cooperation is more what we need. And it's why John and I like to try to reach common ground, is because we too, we don't like the way the media covers things. We don't like the
I think you got me now. Politicization? No, politicization. Politicization.
That is I don't know how many points you get for that in Scrabble, but that's a tough one. So
the way that and everything, including some very basic time tested public health techniques. Now all of a sudden there's a culture war. So we do really like to try to reach common ground here. The two examples that you used, there were standoffs for long period of time, and that didn't happen here. It was like all of a sudden, people are being, law enforcement are not identifying themselves, and they are picking people up, and and so far you're right. It's not like people have been disappeared like Venezuela or wherever. But it is alarming. It is not what's normal for the United States. You know, these sort of actions are not what we're used to. You know, I mean, one of the things that I think that makes our country great is due process, and you know, our constitutional right to be able to protest and to speak out. And we agree that if there's bad actors involved in vandalism or violence, then they need to be then they need to you need to intervene in that situation. But we, you know, as far as I can tell, there have been at least 20 million people that have demonstrated / protest around the country, and there are a few thousand people that have been arrested for, you know, I mean, the media is doing a very poor job. Even the liberal media is focusing on the most tantalizing parts of this, and we're not really seeing, you know, what the full picture. And that's why John and I called friends of ours in Portland, you know, to find out. And as we're saying about businesses, he walked by a Starbucks that was a block away from what was happening, and it was open and no problems. And, you know, I mean, we get a very twisted view, because let's face it, I mean, media is about making advertising dollars, and if they can't tantalize people, they'll go somewhere where they are stimulated.
Yeah, I call it the TMZification of our media. It seems that essentially all of our media has decided that the way to get eyeballs and clicks, and as a result ad dollars, is to be as sensational as possible, and they're all a glorified version of TMZ at this point, and it's really disappointing. I did talk with a client that is in Portland, not far from where activity is going on, and he's on the left end of the ledger on most things, and he said that it is pretty good during the day, but there's a certain hour of night after which you don't want to go into that area. And in his mind, it's really sad because it used to be a really vibrant and kind of fun area. And I think that part of the issue is, in my mind, it's that we're continuing to foment rage, and we're continuing to, essentially reward, in some respects, these activities. And so you're rewarded with attention, you're rewarded with an adrenaline rush. And so whether, if you're pulling down, a statue, normally that doesn't hurt anybody, although it has hurt some of the people pulling the statues down. And one gentleman was killed from it, or at least brain damage. It was, I don't know if you guys saw the one that fell on the gentleman's head. I didn't
see that. I'm unaware of that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's not that safe of a thing to pull these things down. And I think they learned from that one to have longer ropes and be farther away. But you're going to get an adrenaline rush by pulling down statues and getting that sort of rage out. And I understand, the antipathy towards some of these statues, but these are inanimate objects. And if it's encouraged, then you're going to go to the next one and then the next one, because you get that other rush. And there are more productive ways to accomplish what you're looking to accomplish. And even if you feel passionately about the statues, then you should do it the way that Ole Miss did. Ole Miss had students and people that were not happy with the statue that was on the campus. They petitioned, the university agreed with them, and they safely moved it to a Civil War graveyard. And so, I mean, there's productive ways to do this, to avoid us sort of tail spinning out into like Robespierre's Reign of Terror. And we do have systems that, I know people get frustrated with how slow the system moves, but I'm telling you, I call my senator, my local Utah senator, all the time about things and say, hey, what are we going to do about this? And we talk about what we can do about it. We figure out how to address it, and he addresses it, and we find solutions, or we understand the other side, and then figure out, how to negotiate. I mean, we're very much fans of the book by some Harvard professor just called Getting to Yes, How to Negotiate Agreement Without Giving In. And that's the way you always hear the US legislature say, we're trying to get to yes. It's because they know this book, but they don't live this book. If you live it, it's you separate the people from the problem, and you're hard on the problem, and you're soft on people. You get on the same side of the table and you look at the problem and you attack the problem. And what we seem to have in the United States right now is a fair amount of, similar to like in a marriage, when one party says, "Oh, I'm so frustrated with this, and this," and the other party starts trying to solve it, and they say, "No, I don't want you to solve my problem. I just want you to listen to my problem." It seems like that's way too much of what's going on in the United States. Everybody wants to vent their problem, and not enough want us to, like, I think if we want to get happy with each other, we should probably work together, like get side by side and attack the problem, find options for mutual gain, and build on some common beliefs instead of constantly sort of tossing the bombs over at each other. I mean, it's something that Bill Clinton did really well. And do I love Bill Clinton? No, but Bill Clinton was always schmoozing the other side and working with the other side. And Barack Obama wasn't as effective as that. To some extent, I wish we elected more often governors than senators and attorneys, because I think governors have had to be executives and attorneys. And so Bill Clinton did a good job.
Trent, let me challenge you on something. You talked about going for the yes, calling your senator. We're three white dudes having this conversation. Is there in your mind, anything worth addressing in the argument that the same avenues are not available to people of color, at least not, the road isn't as wide for them at the very least? Do you see any of that from your perspective? Is that, is there any veracity to that viewpoint?
Well, I think, I might be making a lot of people mad on this call, but I'll just continue making people mad. I believe that those avenues are available to people of color, but I don't think I think that there's a segment of those that grow up, like, I mean, one of my really good friends who was the chairman of my board of directors at another company was a black man that's just, phenomenal and 100 times more successful than I am. And there's countless examples, and he knows what's available to him, and he's tapping into that all the time and has just as easy a channel as I do. But I do think that there's a segment of those that grow up in despair that don't realize that's available to them. And they can, I mean, they can reach out, they can get meetings, they can be heard, but do they avail themselves of that? I don't think that some of them realize that they can avail themselves of that and will be heard and understood and respected if they make the effort. I know that my friend Dan, that's in the Senate that I reach out to, he would absolutely hear anybody out that wanted to reach out to him.
Sure. It's interesting what you just said. I actually could not agree more with you about what happens in the mind of a person. You used a perfect word, despair. That is, and I will tell you, I have spoken to enough people. I've been really immersed in looking into the Black Lives Matter movement, and I've become very supportive of it. I've had a lot of people involved in that movement on this show. I don't agree with what you're saying. I don't think those doors are as open in every part of the country. I think there are parts of the country that are different, and this gets to the heart of what I think is the real challenge we have in our country, is that we have lost the ability to see the subtlety and nuance of any issue. That every issue that we're going to discuss, like you talked about, and I agree with you. You talked about the man who drove the car and the police shot him, and yeah, that was police brutality. And then also you could say he shouldn't have been driving away from the police, yeah. So that probably doesn't warrant shooting the guy, and that's not what police are supposed to do, of course. But there is a nuance and a thread of nuance that runs through that issue that needs to be looked at free of all this emotion, and it's so hard for us to get there. And then when we make a choice of what we're going to do, that's when we want emotions like compassion, understanding to enter in my opinion. But I wanted to ask you. So I wanted I got a couple of notes here I wanted to run by you. So
and real quickly, I mean, I know that I absolutely understand. I mean, I was brought on by my sister-in-law, who probably sees eye to eye with you on a lot of things, and she and I have, fun discussions all the time. But again, I think that if there is if there are people across the country who feel like, if there are situations where people across the country are unable to gain access to their representatives the way that I would, by just sending an email, showing up at an office, or picking up a phone, because they feel like I'm not going to be heard, because there may be some prejudice residing in the mind of that person that I'm going to approach. Those problems absolutely should be addressed.
Sure.
I do think they're better addressed through love, and even through peaceful protest, than through letting things devolve into rioting. I really think that rioting stokes the wrong feelings between people.
one of the things you said early on in this, and it's very important to me, I've said it over and over again on the show, anytime we talk about these protests, is the winning of hearts and minds. The protests, Eric said it, 20 million people around the world have protested. I think the number's bigger than that now. Because they are largely peaceful, they have captured a lot of hearts and minds around the world. If it was all riots and flame and burn, no one would care. You'd lose that. But are you familiar with a gentleman named Lee Merritt?
Lee Merritt. I do not know Lee Merritt.
Lee Merritt is an attorney, and he is someone who has really become sort of an advocate for all these Black Lives Matter organizational, the things that Black Lives Matter consider to be crimes against people of color that have been unaddressed. One of the big ones is the Breonna Taylor story. Of course, you've heard of her. Still, no one's been arrested in that case. But if do you know who Ahmaud Arbery is? What was?
Oh yeah.
So when Lee Merritt and his team got involved, it was more than 2 months after that had occurred. No one had even been brought into custody. They had I watched the campaign happen on Instagram and Facebook because I follow them. It was all about writing letters, making phone calls, getting people in the community involved, and they got those people answering to the justice system. But they had to work they would tell you we had to work much harder than affluent white people would have had to work in this community to get that done. I think that's undeniable that exists in communities around the United States of America. Do you deny that is present in communities in America?
No, I don't. I wouldn't deny that. And in fact, I mean, it is a little bit, in my mind, surprising that all of the rage and frustration and as a result, protest. It really surprises me, frankly, that it didn't come immediately from one of the two cases that you cited. I know that maybe it was just the strength and the pathos that was evoked from the George Floyd video that really was the tipping point. But those are tragic situations that are despicable, and that most of us should be 100% of us, but hopefully at least 99.9% would immediately condemn. But the fact that not that I know it's a true story, but not that I just get my anecdotes from movies, but Just Mercy is a great movie and depicts some of those challenges. And I absolutely believe that they exist and persist and need to be addressed. But I do think I continue to feel that the right way they're addressed is very organized protests. I do think there's the problem that anybody, BLM or whoever, is going to face is that people take those situations as an opportunity. Opportunistic people are going to take that as an opportunity to make trouble that BLM or whoever doesn't actually even want. And so it's tough. It's a tough nut to crack, and it needs to be addressed. But I think that it should be addressed through specific action as much as possible. I mean, I think that
like what they successfully did down there. They got enough people to campaign for justice, and they got it.
Yep. Yeah. And so I love to see that kind of action that leads to this is the exact goal that we're working on. And some of us that all of us believe, like if you ask me about Black lives, I would say that Black lives have infinite and eternal worth, that we're all sons and daughters of God, and that as a result we're sort of heirs to that, and so Black lives have infinite and eternal value, greater than many could possibly comprehend for any of us. And so I believe in that, but then I want to go to the Black Lives Matter goals on their own website and read about that they seek to disrupt the family. That's something that's harder for me to get really excited about. We have a local chapter of Black Lives Matter that's independent of the national chapter that kind of isn't that way. And
what is it exactly that they want to do in terms of disrupting family? I don't understand. I didn't know that part.
Well, it says, I could pull it up real quick here.
Please,
I think.
Please do.
So hang on. So,
do you mind if I'm while you're pulling?
Chime in, Eric. Please chime in.
So one of the things that I think about with this, Trent, I completely agree with you as far as part of what I do in my work is advocate for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and some of that is with legislation. And so I teach people to do exactly what you're talking about. I believe in it. I know that we've done great things through those methods. And as you mentioned a university, well, we did that in our town here. We just went through the right kind of, there was a protest, but there was also, we went through the city council to get a statue relocated. It went through, boy, did I sit through a lot of hours of meetings, and there was, literally hundreds of people, giving public comment. And I believe in that system. And I know that there have been many advocates, including one of the things that John and I talk about, defund police is an advocacy unit that has been going on for a long time. We don't like the language that much, but that was going on far, for a long time. They've been working on the 8 Can't Wait campaign, one of which is, this would address the situation that you're talking about. You let someone drive away. You don't shoot at a car. You don't jump on, that's one of the things. No chokeholds. There's, they've been working on this advocacy for a long time, and many other things that that advocates of certain kinds of social change have been working on for a long time. And it wasn't until what's just happened with these protests that there was enough political will to start seeing some changes. Corporations weren't changing. Politicians weren't jumping on their side until all of the protests. And all three of us agree that we would love to see protest without destruction. However, the overall, what's happened in an overall way has already made tremendous change. And the only way that the advocacy works is if politicians will, I've been told directly that, well, who do you represent? Like, how many people do you, some politicians, it's strictly, do you got any weight behind you? Do you have any numbers? Because otherwise, and this is what happened, that enough people showed enough passion that politicians started going, uh-oh, I better listen to them, or else, I might be on the wrong side of this when it comes election time. So,
Eric, that's the word too. This is what Americans need to learn about our republic and the way our system works, that you must have a passion for your governance and get involved. We've been sitting on the sidelines going, well, hope it all works out, and I'll just sit here on the sidelines and then critique you when you don't do what I want you to do. And the passion to get involved is what makes us a republic. It's a very, very important element.
And I would argue not only passion to get involved, but I think that you should have passion to get involved, and passion, if you want lasting change, it would be helpful to learn the principles of getting to yes and work with the other side to find common ground to get things done, because if everything is done by executive fiat by whoever happens to be in power at the time, it'll be reversed by executive fiat by who gets in power next.
Right.
And the more power, I think it's dangerous. Frankly, I understand the frustration of the Democrats, and I know for a fact you're right. I mean, they're right. It was frustrating that Mitch McConnell and his crew, all they were obstructionists throughout the Obama presidency.
So you acknowledge that they did that?
Oh, they were obstructionists, but at the same time, Obama did not do like Bill Clinton and work with them on like, how can we find some common ground here? It was, we are going to shove this through, and if it's a straight party vote, I don't care, because elections have consequences. And you're just like, that's not how you get lasting change. Do like Bill did and schmooze them a little bit and figure out how you can work together.
Yeah, he was a statesman. True. Yeah.
And so, yeah, Mitch was absolutely in it. Mitch and his gang of cronies, who I wish we had term limits on all of these yahoos. They were obstructionists. And so Nancy Pelosi and her crew are now saying, if we get Joe Biden in and we get in more obstruction from these people, we're going to get rid of the filibuster. We're going to pack the Supreme Court. And it's just like, oh, folks, come on. Like, those weapons that you form end up getting used against you. And so if you're frustrated that judges are just being very easily approved by a simple majority, then you shouldn't have done the nuclear option when Harry Reid was in charge.
It's so short-sighted, and everybody who gets into everyone who seeks those offices for the purpose of the power becomes enrolled in that short-sighted power balance crap, and none of it's representative of us. None of it's representative of people. Now, I want to look. I'm gonna sort of take control here. Trent, you were gonna read us something from the Black Lives Matter website. Did you find it?
Yeah. So it says this is on their webpage on what we believe, and if you read through it, it certainly reads and feels a little bit Marxist, right? And I know that some of the founders say we're avowed Marxists, we're trained Marxists, and so that's uncomfortable for some of us that feel like Marxism has been a failure in the past. But it says, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by, now this is the qualifier that sounds better, but it's hard to swallow. We disrupt, instead of just we supplement or we complement, we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children. It seems like it's almost like you can hear the Soviets saying, yeah, your child has this skill, and so we're taking them out of the home and we're making them a gymnast, right? I like the Western prescribed nuclear family structure. It's what brings me the very most joy in my life. And so, I mean,
me too.
They have some lightning, or there's some lightning rods in here that just I'm so supportive of. As a Christian, we talk about the lost sheep, right? And so when that lost sheep, you might have 99 that are doing just fine, but the one that's lost, you leave the 99 and go take care of the one that's lost. And so if there are people in our society that are being left behind, I have I didn't get accepted to UCLA even though I had all the right statistics. And I tend to think as a white male, I probably needed to be an order of magnitude above the statistics to get in. And so affirmative action probably prevented me from getting into UCLA, but that doesn't bug me at all. I kind of am a big fan of affirmative action. I don't think it should happen forever, because hopefully we get to an equilibrium that we're all sort of competing based on our own merits. But in the meantime, helping out those that are in need, going out of your way. I mean, I participate in rescue.org for people that are, refugees. We should go out of our way for people that are suffering. So I'm not even sure where I was going, other than we were talking about the family and how the family brings us joy. I'm meandering. I'm sorry. I'm sure there was a point in there somewhere.
So
I've been wondering where the Marxist, I in the city council meeting, I don't do a lot of social media, but I hear this Marxism, Marxism, Marxism. I'm like, I don't hear anything about Marxism, you know. But so,
yeah, the founders in interviews have said, I'm a trained Marxist, and so is my, other co-founder. And what I find kind of interesting about that personally, and I'm not some conspiracy theory guy, but when you say trained Marxist, like it's not only Marxist, which is an uncomfortable thing for me. Now, that said, in my religion, we have an article of faith that says we claim the privilege to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience and allow all people the same privilege. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. And so if somebody wants to be a Marxist, I'm okay with that. But you can do a master planned community where you within that community live a Marxist lifestyle, but trying to force Marxism on other people tends to lead to what happened in the Soviet Revolution, where anybody, like, this only works if we're all in on it. So those of you who aren't in on it, we're taking you out. And so I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it's the history of Marxism is not positive for those that don't buy into Marxism once Marxism comes into power. But if you like Marxism, you can establish it within a community. If you love, democratic socialism, you can establish it within a community. But forcing it on other people, the way that we can get along best when we have different ideas is to get back to a little bit more of a not exerting power, like you're saying, and instead kind of live and let live. And if you really love socialism, there's nothing that stops you from forming socialist communities. And we all do little versions of socialism, and we like some portions of socialism. I mean,
Sure.
I'm glad there's a social safety net. And I just established a toy co-op where we're co-owning some toys together so that we can have more toys, right? And so there's many versions of it that I'm not like entirely opposed to it, but when it's sort of forced onto people and you hear people like the gentleman that's the Black Lives Matter leader in New York that said, we're gonna get what we want, and if we don't, we're gonna burn it all down, feels a little intimidating to me. And I don't think that's the message that you wanna be sending. But if you listen to the Black Lives Matter woman here in Utah, she's wonderful. And so it's just like there's competing forces within that organization.
Once again, nuance and subtlety woven into the issue. It's interesting because I went and read that what you wrote from what you read for myself as well. Now Mike is saying that they're talking about community. Go to a BLM protest. I've been to a couple of them. They were fine. There was zero violence at the protests I attended. They are feeding and clothing the homeless. I must admit that I see Trent's point of view, and I want to know why does and I would like to know an answer to this question. Why does the nuclear family have to be dispatched in order for us to have a sense of community? I don't understand how those are diametrically opposed.
Right. I mean, a lot of us are totally fine with the phrase "it takes a village." That's okay. I mean, I don't want to abdicate my responsibility as a parent and have my child raised by the village, but I like other people helping reinforce values and helping create community. And so if it said we seek to supplement or we seek to complement, but we seek to disrupt. I don't want to choke on a word too much, but that's even since being called on that by many people, they haven't changed that word to kind of say, yeah, that's probably not the right word. We should probably go with we seek to supplement. They've kept it there, and it feels aggressive.
So I want to say one thing. There's an organization. There is also a movement, and the movement. I guarantee you, the vast majority of people that have participated in demonstrations and are supporting the idea, they're supporting the idea that Black Lives matter, that Black lives are important, and almost all the people that are supportive are not interested in changing the government into a Marxist government. I don't think that's what's going on. Even if, and I suspect, even though I don't know the particular person you're referring to, I suspect that he's hearkening back to some of the Black Panther days, who also, by the way, were not. They had some very aggressive tactics. They armed themselves, and they also had these incredible schools, and they were feeding children, and they had some incredible programs here in California that they did a lot of good in communities that needed some help. And so
And I'm not sitting here, like I say, I think that the local chapter in Utah, which is an independent chapter, they might be independent specifically because they've read through some of these things and said, it's kind of not where we are, so we're going to be an independent chapter. They do some good things, and so I'm sure there's wonderful people that are involved, and the vast majority of people are rallying to the idea that Black Lives Matter, and they do. And then making sure that somehow those that, for whatever horrific reason, don't yet comprehend that is an important cause. But personally, we've been supportive in our family of the NAACP that frankly has a little bit more of a religious bent, and has come out with some statements that just warm my heart instead of giving me heartburn. And so we're a bit more supportive in my family of the NAACP, and then we do like the local Utah chapter. But in all cases, I want, and it's good to get awareness, but I think it's even better to work toward actual change. And so that what those individuals did and what the gentleman in Just Mercy did, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that everybody should be able to rally around and be on board for. And I do think that even in organizing these protests, it would behoove them to organize them that we're going to do this, we're going to go from here to here, we're going to be on the steps of the Capitol, we're going to have speakers, we're going to be there for this amount of time, and then we're going to peacefully go home, and we'll do it again tomorrow if we want to. But it should be such that, I remember my friends in high school, and if there was an opportunity to make a mess, then they'd take advantage of that opportunity to make a mess. And so it doesn't help support the cause to create the environment where messes can be made by people that are just taking advantage rather than actually supporting the cause. And so I think they could be more organized in their efforts and have some more specific goals that they could work with the other side on and say, hey, these are the goals that all of us should. I mean, I think most of us, almost all of us, including police, would advocate intelligent police reform. But it does, back to our original topic of federalism versus local situations, police are inherently a local situation. They're taken care of at the city by city or municipality by municipality level. And so I think our best thing would be actually what Obama was working on, and that seems to have fallen to the wayside too much, which is benchmarking best practices and advocating for change at the places where there's the biggest problems, whether that's the Atlanta police force, whether that's the New York police force, wherever it is. And I actually think that as we talk about, defund, and I know we've sort of, fixed the bad language of that in this conversation, I do think that to some extent, a little bit of a surge would be helpful in some communities. I mean, I lived in Baltimore, and I taught at Essex Community College. Essex is one of the most challenged neighborhoods there. So while I was, working investment banking, 100-hour work weeks, Saturday mornings, I would teach at Essex Community College, Intro to Business Industry. And it was a rough neighborhood, and police would not go into it. And as a result, it was an even rougher neighborhood that was ruled by whoever was willing to be the most aggressive. And I think that people need to realize that police do serve a positive role. And it would be nice if we could try to, instead of vilifying them, get back to, we grow up in our day, you had an officer friendly come by your school and talk to you. And I had a really bad interaction with police one time. It was, they were bullying my wife and I a little bit after a miscarriage. And so they were on the phone telling us that we needed to immediately go back to the hospital in the middle of the night and dispose of the remains. And we're like, well, we're going to take care of it. You know that you can't bury that in your backyard. And I know I'm telling you something very graphic. But the police were horrific that night. But they were on the phone because my ecclesiastic leader had called information to ask, what do you do when you have a miscarriage? Like we just didn't want to throw it away in medical waste, frankly. And so he calls 411, and then the police show up at his house saying, who's trying to dispose of an aborted fetus? And so he was a fireman, and he said, around the firehouse, we say that God created firemen so that somebody would like police. And so it's been a long time that a lot of people, you know, you get pulled over by a policeman, and it's not the same as you see a fireman and you love them and you're like, oh, it's such a, you know, the firemen, they're heroes. But the police are heroes too in so many instances.
Well, you know what, Trent? Heroism is determined by what one does. Not all police are heroes. I would say that there are many heroic policemen out there, but being a police officer does not automatically render one heroic. It's what you do. And I think that's once again that important subtle distinction I think that needs to be made.
But I do think that it's not necessarily the Pygmalion effect per se, but it can be a little bit that, right? I mean, if you treat somebody like they're a hero, then they may rise to that occasion. If you treat them like they are a villain and like you're their enemy, then they will feel like they are your enemy. And so I do think we need to go out of our way to build up the police a little bit, but we do need to be better at recruiting them. We need to be better at screening them.
Because if you give the wrong person power and license, they become abusive.
Yep,
So,
in a lot of roles, right? You run into that in government all the time, where that little bit of authority gives them the chance to just, you know, dig in. And so we need to do a better job of recruiting, training, quality controlling, and benchmarking best practices and holding accountable. And defunding to some extent could have negative implications in that, you know, one of the first things to go in bad funding may be the ability to, you know, store video, because it's kind of expensive to store video, but maybe that's something that Google or Amazon could donate if they genuinely care. Then they should donate all sorts of storage and push out video to all policemen, so every one of them, because the police, and maybe you can work on batteries too, because the life of those cameras, they need to turn them on and off so that they'll actually continue to have batteries through the whole day. And so if we could work on the battery power, work on the storage, and get a camera on every one of them, that accountability would be a positive thing.
I agree with you. So I've got to share some comments with you because we are getting out of time here. So I want to read you some comments. You've gotten a little bit of pushback from our viewers. There's a couple of questions I'd like to ask you, and then I want to do like a speed round of a couple of quick questions I can ask you. Carol said, this isn't about BLM, it's about a much larger thing. You're using one paragraph to disavow an important concept. And then Mike wanted to say, they do not say we seek to disrupt. He posted it in there. The word seek isn't in there. He said that they're not coming after your way of life. So he felt like that was an important distinction to make. We had Diana asked a question. I don't know if this is a fair question. I'm going to ask you anyway and see what you want to respond to. She said, Trenton, have you ever been pulled over and thought to yourself, today might be the day I die?
Yeah. So with respect to the Sikh, that was when I was, you know, saying it off the top of my head. And then we went to the site and I read it verbatim. So I apologize that I didn't have their verbiage memorized, but I would argue that we disrupt rather than seek to disrupt might be even a little bit more aggressive, right? Because like they're not trying to, they are disrupting. We disrupt. So and I believe I said multiple times that I'm really supportive of our local chapter that is not Marxist in nature. Mm-hmm. And so if you read through the whole statement and hear some of the things that their leaders have said, I personally am not a big fan of Marxism. And so it's not just that statement. There's a lot of context there. And I know that the last question, I'll answer that, but I feel like I missed something in the middle, but
it's okay. Just a quick answer.
So the last question, no. Oh, well, yeah, I guess, yeah, actually, but not in the United States. I had Brazilian police point their gun at me. I was one of the only white people in an all black town. And we were accused of a crime through some gossip going around the town. And they pointed their gun at me and said, where's your leader? And I didn't even know what they were talking about. And they pistol whipped somebody right in front of me. And we thought that they might, we were being followed by plainclothes police and we had people swerve cars to try and hit us. So yeah, I've experienced something very similar in Brazil when I was one of the only white people. Cause I was in the Bahia, which is about 95% black. And so, yeah, it happens in the reverse a little bit too. And we were pretty scared. I was writing letters to my friends. I was writing letters to my parents saying, everything's great. And I was writing letters to my friends saying, I don't know if I'll live, but if I don't, tell my parents how, I loved my mission and it was great. And so, yeah, I guess I've experienced that, but not here in the United States, but I did in Brazil. And so I don't know what that's worth. It's probably not worth a lot in the context of this conversation.
Diana responded to you and said, that's what black people face every day. That was her point.
And I'll tell you, I know it's different. I think that one of the things that we need to imbue our black brothers and sisters with, if there's any way that we can, is hope and vision of what they could accomplish. Because even though it was scary there wasn't a day that I didn't love there. And so I have a lot of hope and vision and optimism. And that's something that we really need to go out of our way to share with all of our brothers and sisters, is that you can accomplish anything, and I'll be there to give you a hand up to help you accomplish that if I can. And so that's why I'm involved in the NAACP and rescue.org and other activities. I actively try to do that. So I don't know what to say.
I think that you addressed it well. Trent, we're out of time, and I really want to thank you for being here tonight, and I hope you'll come back and do this again with us on other topics. Really enjoyed having you. Look, you like you said, did he leave? Did we lose him?
He's not up anymore. I don't.
Oh, I think we lost Trent.
Was that music coming from his background or your background?
Oh, it's his. But I guess I think we may have lost Trent. I'm going to shoot him a quick text. I wanted to read a couple of the comments that we had from the group.
Well, one of the things that I keep thinking about is some of the, I agree with him about being better organized. And as you know, I studied a lot about Gandhi in the past, and Gandhi did not want any protesters going out that wasn't trained. They actually had training. We had a very specific way that they wanted to protest, and I agree. There could be better organization. However, one of the things that we haven't really talked, a lot about tonight, the sometimes the anger is so, the fire of the anger burns so brightly because there is such a long and deep history of trauma, and this isn't light. The people that we're talking about, they've been discriminated against. They felt fear. I mean, imagine, the stress level that we've been feeling lately with the pandemic. If there was something in your life that all your entire life you felt was unfair to you, and you felt a stress, you felt a concern your whole life. You've seen friends that have been brutalized. You've maybe lost a family member. Or as a white person, you've had friends that you've seen this happen to. So the trauma that's occurred, the disenfranchisement, the system. We've talked a lot about this. There is real systematic racism. People have been denied opportunities in a very systematic way by our government. Police brutality is yes, white people get shot, but not at the same rate that black people do. And so there's the moment that something where it just felt like it had been pushed too far, can't fucking take it anymore. It was already up to here for my whole life, and now it's up to here. And so some of that expression is gonna be angry and disorganized. Now, as you know, I submit that almost all the vandalism, all the looting has nothing to do with.
Yeah, that's not protesters; it's people stealing.
Yeah. That has nothing to do. Now, some of the vandalism has to do with the anger towards the federal government for not, and it's not the most productive way, and it also is part of the whole picture. It's part of, look, man, you imagine holding a whole lifetime of that in and then letting it out. So I just, some of the trauma that people have to go through and real systematic racism for this whole, like, it's, yes, I agree. It should be more organized. It should be more peaceful. It should be more focused. And I completely get that it's going to be a little disorganized, a little messy, and a little bit more violent than is productive. But letting that out, expressing those feelings, also caught the attention of many corporations and many politicians, and that we've seen lots of change already, and we're going to see more positive change. So,
Right on, my friend. Well, I'm gonna wrap us up with my final thoughts for the evening. It's been a good show. I wish we could have had Trent, here to at least say goodbye to him. He emailed me his computer ran out of power, so I'll email him back and we'll get him back on. But let's get into the final bit of the evening. I call it the way I see it. Nationalism is an infantile disease. It is the measles of mankind. That's a quote from Albert Einstein. It's not my favorite quote from Albert. I thought the measles were the measles of mankind, but you get the idea. Nationalism is a disease. I read something earlier this week, and I'm having a hard time letting go of it. A person spoke of the United States having a questionable past and having some work to do to become the land of the free. And this was in a social media platform. They said something along the lines of, we've done well, but we need to do a lot better. And a person responded in the thread, this is the greatest country on earth. And if you have a problem with it, you can get out. And they didn't say it nicely. and it got a lot of likes too. So, a popular perspective. And, I got to tell you, I keep thinking about it because I think it's a sentiment that's become a little more accepted and a little more commonplace in the last decade or so. At least I've seen it more. And I think it's weird. Well, the greatest country in the world, what does that even mean? I can understand I love my country. I can understand feeling lucky to have been born in America. I can also, although there's many more places to have been born that are just as wonderful as USA, but I can even understand God bless the USA. The sentiment, not the song. But the country, the greatest country in the world thing, it just seems so childish to me, and it's destructive too. I've been a traveling musician most of my life, right up until COVID-19 hit. I've been to 16 or 17 countries in just about every major city in the US. I've seen enough of the variety of cultures and lifestyles that this planet has to offer to know that if you believe that America is the greatest country in the world, you must not have seen much of the world. America does do a lot of things really well. We've led the world in much human progression like technology, culture, industry, and most importantly, democracy. We've also made huge mistakes, and we continue to do so. Now, many countries across the world are demonstrably superior to America in many categories, like education, conservation, and happiness. Yeah, did you know that according to the World Happiness Report, yes, there is such a report. I read it. It's quite interesting and it's well vetted. In 2019, the U.S. fell to 19th place, our worst showing ever. Now, the person who wrote that love it or leave it post that started me off on this segment would likely say, what the hell does some survey mean to me? But it isn't just a survey. There's other data that we have as well. The U.S. leads the world in rates of obesity, and more troubling, child obesity, where we are way out in front of everyone else. Depression, we're still third place behind China and India. We lead the world in mass shootings, depending on your definition of what a mass shooting is. But I think we can all agree on this. We have far too many mass shootings in the United States. So maybe there is other evidence to support the findings of the World Happiness Report. One very interesting fact of the World Happiness Report, Canada is now the happiest country on earth and has been for nearly a decade. Strangely, the timing of their ascendance to the top of the list coincides precisely with the date that Justin Bieber left Canada to come to the United States. Okay, I'm making a joke. It's not true. Finland is actually the happiest society on earth according to the list. But did you know that violent crime has been on a steady decline in the United States? FBI data shows that the rate fell by 54% between 1993 and 2018. And until COVID, our economy had been on an upward trajectory for over a decade. Coronavirus marked the end of the longest period of economic expansion in U.S. history from 2009 to 2020 under two different presidents, two different parties. My point is there are areas where we are succeeding and areas where we are failing, just like almost every other country out there. So here's my question. What's the criteria we use for we're the greatest country in the world? So many of us love to self-identify with it, but what is the criteria? Is it necessary? To the guy out there who posted that, love it or leave it, would anywhere qualify as the greatest country in the world so long as you were born there? I see so much of that attitude. I was born here, it's familiar to me, I love it, so it's the greatest country in the world. When I think about the we're number one theory, I can't find any other real criteria, nor can I find a healthy reason to believe in it. But I can tell you a couple reasons why I see danger in this rationale. Number one, we don't aspire to be the greatest. We claim it. We say we've already accomplished it. Not a good look on a society. We've been breaking our arm, patting ourselves on the back for just being us for so long that, but I got to ask you, let me pull this up and ask you guys a question. We've been doing it for so long, but do you kind of get that maybe we've just stopped trying? So let me get back to this. I got myself lost here with my funny little picture, but you get where I'm going. You get where I'm going with this. We've just stopped trying to be better than we are. Number two, this dangerous, unquestioning type of nationalism disguised as your love of your country, that leaves us vulnerable to be manipulated by any Pied Piper who sings the right tune to us. Remember, patriotism is being proud of what your country does. Nationalism is being proud of your country no matter what it does. We would be wise not to confuse the two. And I hope I'm not still sharing my screen, am I, Eric? Okay, good. This isn't a competitive format, number three. So I want you to imagine that I'm at the post office. I'm standing in line at the post office, standing next to all the other people in the post office. I'm holding my package. I've filled out my sheet. I've got it taped on. And I all of a sudden declare, I am the best post office line stander in the world. People would think I was nuts. This isn't a competitive subject, being the greatest in the world. Look, you get a chance to legitimately proclaim your country best country in the world every 4 years. It's called the Olympics. And we're the USA. We're good at the cool sports. So we're not going to have to ever claim number one for some crap like curling. I lived in Costa Rica for 3 weeks when I was a kid, very briefly. I spent a week in Spain once. I got stuck in Turkey for a significant amount of time once too. I never heard anyone in those places screaming that they were number one, their country was number one, unless it was in reference to a soccer match. This weird number one thing is sort of a U.S. phenomenon, and leave it to us to turn everything into a reason to have a barbecue, right? But we should be opposed to this entire line of thinking so that we can continue to progress as a national community. Look, I want you to imagine, now as a parent, and I am a parent, and so imagine I go to school and my son's teacher says, Charlie has done really well in some areas, but he has a lot of work to do in reading and mathematics. Now imagine that I say, you know what? My son is the best student in this class. And if you don't like it, then I'm going to get you fired and you can get the hell out of here. Imagine, would I be a good parent if I did that? George Orwell said nationalism is power hunger tempered with self-deception. I truly believe we need to look at why it's so important to some of us to be not a better nation, but the greatest nation in the world. I believe that if we look closely, that claim comes from a place of insecurity, not strength. Wanting to be number one so badly that we scream it to the world in spite of evidence to the contrary has only made us more paranoid, insecure, and defensive as a country. Meanwhile, the rest of the world watches with a mixture of amusement and horror, while our media, our Congress, and we, the citizens, act out another episode of Real Housewives of the USA. Now, how do we stop? We need to grow up. We're a relatively young society in a country, comparatively speaking. And we're acting out like the teenagers we are. But we need to graduate from global high school now. We need to become an adult version of ourselves among the other grown-up countries and embody the principles of our father, like children will inevitably do if they had good parents. We had Jefferson. Washington, Franklin, Benjamin Franklin. Deeply flawed men, yes, aren't we all? But they had a sound vision for what Franklin called a republic if you can keep it. We can keep it. We can. Maybe. But we'll have to grow up first. Have to stop staring at our cell phones, screaming at each other because our feelings got hurt by some silly thing, and self-obsessing and needing to be right. These are things children do. And we got to quit pretending to be number one. That classification must become unimportant to us, as it should be to any individual or nation striving to be better. If we are involved in that work of striving to be better, then we need to be mature enough to learn that the only country America is in competition with is America. If we can just do a little bit better every day than we were yesterday, competing with ourselves, a little more kinder, a little more generous, a little more united, it will work out for all of us. God bless the USA. I'm sorry, I can't stand that Lee Greenwood song, and I had to make another joke. Guys, that's our show. Thank you so much. It was lovely. Mike, if you're still there, you were awesome. Trent, you were fantastic. So good to have you. We'll be back next week. Stay safe. And you know, if anybody out there knows someone you think would be a good guest on our show, please message me. I want to expand and broaden our horizons. I want to get some really good people on the show who have good expertise in a lot of these areas. So, you know, and also I put the phone number in. There probably wasn't much room for it tonight, but we are a call-in show now. So just want to get you guys participating more. Please share about the show. Ask people to join the page. And we love you all. Have a great night. Be safe.
Thanks, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, Eric.